I'm just going to give a bit of an introduction into Model UN and the rules of procedure of Model UN. If you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them into the chat box, which I don't know if, and then I can answer them as we go. So I think the first thing to say is that Model UN is about ultimately trying to find solutions to problems, and you will always start your committee session and work out what topic you're going to discuss. Normally there'll be two that will be on the agenda for the weekend, and you decide, well, are we going to, am I in the Security Council and we're doing sanctions on Russia? Or are you in, I don't know, DISEC and looking at autonomous weapons and things like that? Can you go to the next slide for me, please, Ryan? Yeah, and so you'll be representing a country. So, that might be China in a committee, which might be United Nations Security Council. It might be looking at UN Women. It might be any number of international organizations. And so your main task is to try and find solutions to problems. Can you go to the next slide, Ray? Thank you. So how do committees work? So, in effect, you're in a room with 20 to 30 other students, each of whom are also representing different countries, and you stand up, you give speeches, then you go and discuss things, and then at the end of it, you come up with a document that basically says what you're going to do. We call that a resolution, what the committee resolves to do, and what the countries within the committee resolve to do. So what do you do? So there are all sorts of procedures in Model UN, and I'm, for the minute, I don't think they're hugely important. You have roll calls and various things, but I like to think of Model UN as divided into really three key aspects. So that's speaking and speech making, it's negotiating, and then it's writing, or actually committing the solutions you've discussed to paper. So the first really key part of a debate is a moderated caucus. That's just a time where different delegates will stand up and will speak on a specified motion. So that might be it's a specific area of the topic you want to discuss. Or it might be we'll go back to sanctions on Russia, and so you might be talking about, I don't know, the topic is reasons why Russia needs to be sanctioned. And so you start discussing that, and will have a time limit of say 90 seconds in which you stand up and you give a speech that might be articulating your position on this issue. It might be criticizing another country's position. It's just about offering your thoughts on a particular topic. And so that's the forum where things are discussed, concerns are aired. It's also now, according to the new MUN rules of procedure, is a time for cross-examination. So unlike in previous years, now there'll be a chance to ask questions of other delegates and get there and be a bit more rigorous in terms of the way in which we debate some things. So that is sort of the first key element of Model UN, which is this sort of open debate where individuals speak one at a time. Now, the second key element of Model UN is negotiation. Now, these are known as unmoderated caucuses. If you can go to the next slide, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So unmoderated caucuses are less formal. So this is not a situation where delegates stand up one at a time and address the committee. Instead, it's a time where there are the rules of procedure, well, not the rules of procedure, but at least sort of the formal proceedings are temporarily suspended, and delegates will move about the room and you'll talk to each other and you'll argue, you'll say, this is my solution, and someone will say no, and then this is a time to go around and see what other delegates are thinking, to feel the mood of the room. So just sort of already talk about how this fits together. Say in a debate, and we're still going with our sanctions on Russia example, you will start the committee with everyone offers their positions and what's known as a general speaker, but just think of it as sort of an initial half an hour where each country stands up and says what it is. Then you move into the first substantive area. So that's going to be an unmoderated caucus. Again, this formal debate where people stand up and discuss a topic. Now, you might have a couple of different periods. You know, you might spend 20 minutes discussing reasons why Russia should be sanctioned. Then you might spend 15 minutes discussing potential sanctions. Then you might spend another 15 minutes on another topic. So that's sort of where you're going to have this debate, this discussion in a formal setting, moderated by the head of the committee, which is the chair. Then after that, you might go into this negotiation. So you already worked out where certain delegates' positions are, what their beliefs are, what their solutions are, and you'll go and discuss them with them. You'll see what they're thinking and suggest a few things in return. So now you're already some way in. You've had some formal discussions, you've had some informal discussions, and now you come to the final and probably the most important bit, which is actually taking the solutions to the problem and putting them on paper. So this is known as a resolution, and it's all it is in really simple terms. It's just a document that says what you're going to do. Now there are all sorts of formalities around resolutions, but we won't worry about them today. But we'll come to them another time. But effectively, what it says is that this committee will do this, and it explains it in a bit more detail. And then effectively, once you've written the resolution, there are various procedures of debating the resolution and arguing about it and submitting amendments. But after all that, you've got to the end of debate on the topic, and you'll have a vote on the resolution, and hopefully the resolution will pass. And then it will have been enacted by the committee. Yes, you present it to the chairs. Yeah. So as I say, there are certain formalities. So this has been brought to my attention by, I think, Ryan. So you take your resolution, you submit it to the chairs for approval, and then they'll hopefully approve it or send it back to you to review, rework, whatever. So just to sort of briefly summarize where we are now, I, by the way, have skipped out some of the details. If you really want to get more actively involved with Model UN, there are more things to add in, but I just wanted to cover the real essentials for today. So yeah, there will be things that are missing, but as I say, not everyone wants to hear every detail now. So just sort of take again the broad overview. What happens? So you come into your committee room, sitting there with 20 or 30 other people. Obviously, it's digital for this year, but we'll still keep the in-person idea. And you're going to basically decide what topic you're going to be doing out of the two that you have at the minute. Then everyone's going to stand up and give their position on the issue. Then once that's done, we're now into the sort of substantive issue that I've already talked about, where we're going to have some debating, some negotiating. They'll be sort of muddled in together depending on what delegates want. Then when that's all done, or while that's going on, you'll be writing out your thoughts in a resolution, and then eventually you'll submit them to the chairs. That will hopefully be approved. Then you'll vote on them, and then it's done. Now that's a real sort of hopefully clear explanation of basically what goes in a Model UN. So it's about debating, negotiating, and writing, and that's it. Are there any questions on that? I hope that sort of makes sense to you. Do feel free to put any questions there if there's anything that you want to be clarified. If you are really keen on taking it up further and want to know more about the real specifics and details, do send us a message and we can send you the formal rules of procedure document which goes through everything.
Let's go through a few specific aspects of MUN that I want you guys to get a more deeper understanding of. So starting off with opening speeches. So I know we talked about a lot of different kinds of speeches you can do throughout the MUN. We're going to give you a specific example of an opening speech. So I don't expect you guys to just read this and memorize it, but I'm giving you sort of an example of what kind of I would say elements you would need to incorporate into a speech. So things like a catchy starting, things like being really particular and to the point with what you want to convey to the audience, And I would say things like being very informative and being innovative with your solutions as well. So I'm going to go over this in more detail later on, but I just wanted to show you guys what kind of, you know, talking you would do in MUNs. So let's go towards, all right, our main topic for today, how to become an amazing speaker in 60 minutes. So in MUNs, a huge, I would say, decision-making factor within your performance would be the way you speak during the entire conference. Now, speaking is not just based on what you convey in terms of information, but also how you convey it. We're going to be focusing more on the how you convey it part right now. So starting off, here is what my personal opinion is a good speech should be. I chose it not because of any personal admiration for anyone, but just because of how he was able to convey his point of view, not just in terms of what he was saying, but how he was saying it. So I'm going to open the floor to the audience right now, and I want to ask you guys, what particular aspects in that 30-second clip do you think really made that speech stand out to something that would be said in a regular manner? You can just unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi, could I go for it?
Yeah, go.
All right. I think what makes the speech very powerful, I think it was in Illinois, is firstly the content. Obama in the speech is telling a story. He's relating that even though he's an outsider as he was then, his story is part of the American story. His dream is part of the American dream. So the content is very powerful, especially when it's storytelling. Storytelling in speeches always builds a connection with the audience. His hand gestures are also very important. The way he talks not only shows his dominance, but also adds, I guess, more points to what he's saying. He highlights the important points. He doesn't do a lot of it the way Trump does. I think he does it in a more eloquent way. And finally, his voice, even though he has, a unique voice, I think here he's still amplifying it in the sense where he's adding more emotion so that his voice resonates. And it really touches a part of you where regardless of whether or not you support him or even whether you know the context, you can feel that his message is resonating with you. Funnily enough, I actually watched the speech before writing like almost all of my MUN major speeches. So yeah, big fan of the speech.
I'm going to be very honest. I just found this out after a quick Google search, so not really into that. But yeah, you're absolutely right there. I think you covered three major points. You basically talked about his hand gestures that make a huge difference in how he's making an impact about the points he's saying. At the same time, discussing the fact that he used a lot of different tonal variation in his words. He just wasn't sticking to one particular monotonous tone. He was constantly going up and down in his speech tone. That made a huge difference in how the audience perceived what he was saying. So I'm going to ask one more person to highlight something else that happened in the speech that really stood out to you personally.
Can I go?
Go ahead.
So I know that for this speech, it was like a really crowded room, but the fact he was looking at the camera, I guess, is the equivalent of him making eye contact with his audience. So people who are watching at home, they feel like Obama's like addressing them directly, so it makes it more personal. So you connect more, so it makes it more effective.
Absolutely right. Eye contact makes a huge difference when it comes to speaking in public, especially when you are speaking to a huge crowd. You can't just focus your eye contact on a specific section of the audience. You have to make sure you address the entire auditorium you're in. I'm going to add one more point myself. I'm going to say he paused at the right moments. He paused when he wanted people to absorb the information he was conveying. He paused at the right moments for people to applaud what he was saying. And he also paused to create impact into his sentences. Whenever he wanted to, let's say the fact that he quoted something, I'm not sure of the language, I think that was Latin. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But whatever that language was, when he paused after that, the impact that created was unmatchable. And that is something that really people, when they incorporate it into their speeches, they make a huge difference. So moving on. Since we've discussed what makes a good speech, let's talk about the few specific aspects we find out today. So a good speech comprises of a few main things. These are just the rundown basic items that I always tell people in a short class, but if you stay along, you're going to learn a lot more in detail about what good speeches comprise of. So first of all, we take the starting and the ending. Your starting makes a huge difference in how the audience listens to you. Considering we're in a generation where our attention spans have gone down so much due to courtesy of TikTok and Instagram, it's really difficult to make sure people maintain their attention to the speech you're giving. So if you may give a really catchy starting, you are for sure going to capture people's attention and make sure to listen to the rest of your speech. If you are unable to do that, And if you start off with something like, hey, my name is Ryan, and I'm going to talk to you about XYZ, no one's going to listen to you unless they're your friend. So that's one thing. Secondly, your ending. If you are able to link the ending you're giving to the beginning of your speech, regardless of it being an opening speech, a moderated caucus, etc., you are showing that you're structured, and you're also showing that you're solving a major problem that you discussed during your entire speech. So if I start off by saying, the world is overarmed and peace is underfunded, and if I end by saying, let's work together to ensure that the world is underarmed and peace is overfunded, people, even though that sounds a lot very cheesy, people will actually think that I kind of give a few major solutions that might solve the issue because I linked my ending to my beginning. That makes a huge difference to how your speech is perceived. The second thing, your body language, your posture, your hand gestures, your facial expressions, etc. Now, I know most of you might be thinking that we're in front of a camera. Why does body language matter? Trust me, it does. You can still use your hand gestures. You can still show your facial expressions. Your posture may not matter a lot, but sometimes if you're standing up for your, laptop speech, it will make a huge difference. Lastly, tone of speaking. Like Anas pointed out, the way he changed the amplification of his voice made him sound more interesting and made people want to listen to him more. So that's the basics of a good speech. I covered this. Now I'm going to hand it over to Gyubin so he can go into the details of the techniques behind speaking. Gyubin, the floor is yours.
Amazing, thank you. So I just want to ask you guys, do you guys remember any speeches, political speeches that you have heard before? Oh, any famous quotes, famous leaders who have given notable speeches? Any ideas? Feel free to unmute yourselves and just shout an example out.
Oh, I've heard, obviously, I think everybody's heard of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream."
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been, that since we were young. I think that's probably one of the famous speeches. But yeah,
absolutely. Yep, I Have a Dream, an incredibly famous speech, and we all know how it goes. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, and so on. And what others? What about Winston Churchill, for example, or John F. Kennedy? Yeah.
Yeah, we shall fight them on the beaches by Churchill.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right, just one more example. If anyone has, if anyone has an example off the top of their heads.
SDR's inaugural address. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Of course, incredible. Yep, all three are excellent examples. And so, what do these have in common? So I'm gonna. So my idea is that they have 2 things in common. Firstly, they are supremely quotable. We weren't there. We didn't listen to the actual speech. We weren't there at the inauguration or at the march, but we still remember them, and we were taught them. But they stick in our heads because, and that's my second point, because they use particular rhetorical techniques that make them extremely quotable and memorable. So today, Alvaro and I are going to be covering some of these techniques that epitomize certain patterns of thought or argument, and in so doing, imprint both the message and the diction in the listener's mind. So of course, going back to Model UN, if you can come up with such pithy lines or such witty openness in your speeches, you have won the fight. As long as your ideas, your thoughts, your lines are stuck inside the minds of your colleagues in the room, you have won the game. Okay, so let's talk about the first technique here, antithesis, which is of course contrasts. So the antithesis, as you might imagine, is the juxtaposition of ideas or words in a parallel structure. So you have 2 clauses with similar structures, and they have opposite ideas or opposite messages. So for example, Margaret Thatcher's famous address. Okay, so let's just pause there, think about what she said. So U-turn if you want to. So that's of course a pun on the word U-turn, which she says is a favorite media catchphrase. And then the second clause is the ladies not for turning. So of course, and in between she pauses to soak in the applause and the attention. And this, it's still being quoted 30 years down the road. And it's just incredible the way she phrased it. And let's think about another example, John F. Kennedy, an incredibly famous example. So let's think about what you accomplish by using this particular technique of juxtaposition. Any ideas? What's the point of having 2 contrasting ideas, one after the other? Any thoughts? Why is it so effective? Also memorable?
because it's short. It's not very like a very lengthy sentence, and it's easy to remember.
It's witty, it's pithy. Anything else?
Yeah, by contrasting the two ideas, you put more emphasis on each one in turn, and it really stresses the point in the audience's mind.
Yep. So think about a counterexample. Think about a speaker that says, look, let me explain it to you because you clearly don't understand what you're doing. I'm going to speak as if you don't know anything. I'm going to say, you know, I'm better than you. I'm not going to make a U-turn. So would you prefer that kind of speaker over someone who presented the same idea the way that Margaret Thatcher did? Probably not. You don't want to be spoken down to as an audience member. You don't want to listen to someone who's being condescending or patronizing. So the first idea here is that these speakers, using contrasts, supply the listeners with food for thought. So the listener has to think about what these two juxtaposed ideas mean, and then understand why they're so funny, so catchy, and how they represent the stance of the speaker. So the key idea here is that a speaker who permits other people to draw their own conclusions shows greater respect for the intelligence and the way they think than compared to someone who says something in such a direct and obvious way that only an idiot could fail to see the point. And so what this does is to get the audience feeling like they're part of the inside joke. And so they're more impressed by the speech and more likely to remember what was said to them in the content. And the second part of this, this tool here is that the value judgment here is very, very implicit. It's very subtle. So again, I just want to ask, in the first example, you turn if you want to, the lady is not for turning. What's the value judgment here? What is Margaret Thatcher's conclusion? Is turning good or bad?
I think she's saying that her opinion can't be changed no matter if the country's opinion changes. She's just going to stick by her policies, and nobody externally is going to kind of sway her ideas.
Yep. So in the value judgment here, when it comes to the media catchphrase, the U-turn, is she saying it is good or bad? Yep. And in the second stance, second example by John F. Kennedy, you've got two examples. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So there are two ideas here. The first is to ask what your country can do for you, and the second is ask what you can do for your country. And so what is the implication here? Which one is better in JFK's opinion? Second, obviously, right? It appeals to your patriotism, appeals to your love of country. And what they're doing here is to providing the listeners with two sides of an argument, and they're presenting it in such a way that there is one very, very obvious choice. There's one very obvious value judgment to make, but they're not making it for the audience. They're leaving it up to them. And again, tying back to my first point about respect for your audience, it's not patronizing. It leads them to your own conclusion, and it induces the same conclusion that you have. It doesn't, say, this is my idea, and you should think the same way as well. So what this technique of antithesis does is to basically respect your audience and to present a very, very obvious idea in a way that seems to be a fair and balanced perspective of two ideas. Make sense? It's a bit of a difficult technique to use in speech writing, especially if you're under time pressure, as you are at MUN conferences. But if you can get into the groove of writing such contrasts or juxtapositions, I think you'll find a very effective tool in your speech writing arsenal. Okay, and the second technique, Alvaro, take us away.
Thank you. All right, I'll try to be quick. Second technique we're going to be talking about is Anaphora. So in MUN, you will be listening to lots of people talking, and you will probably lose record of what they are saying at some point or another. So you want to impress the audience. Moreover, even given the fact that probably you're starting at your MUN career will be done online. So you really have to get your speech going on. So Anaphora is a very easy technique. It's simply a question of repetition. You have to find some words, some clause that you will be repeating over and over sequentially, and try to give it some meaning. So we've got here an extract of a very famous speech. I hope that you all know it. Most of you, all of you that are British. I don't know, can you go to the next slide? All right, so here I'm gonna go with my preference. So you all like Churchill, but I think the second link, okay, so this is the original recording of Churchill, but you know, he had a problem with diction, and I'm a fan of Harry Potter. So if you go to this second link, we've got Gary Oldman doing it, and I think that'll be easier for all of us to understand. So what did he do here? By stating the same clause all over and over, he gave a sense of security, he gave a sense of meaning, he gave a sense of, you know, what he pretended to do. He reinstated his intention, and also he helped people follow up his speech. So you want to do it easy, you want to do it quick, and you want to make meaning stick. If you use repetition, you will make meaning stick. Pass next slide, please. There you go. So what are you going for? You're going for meter, you're going for rhyme, and you're going for rhythm. So try not to be, you know, writing poetry while you're a MUN. It's not nice. No one wants to hear to your sonnets. But still, try to make it blank verse. Try to make it sonorous. Try to make a cadence going on. Try to make your speech something beautiful that will stick in people's minds and let them and help them remember you. All right, boss, you can interrupt.
Yeah, so one of the things you want to do when you're using this technique of Anaphora is to go with shorter clauses in the beginning and then make them longer as you go on. So for example, look at Churchill's speech. The first sentence is "we shall go into the end," a fairly short sentence in terms of syllables. And the second clause is "we shall fight in France, we shall fight on the seas and oceans." So that's a doublet of this particular clause. And then he goes on with longer sentences. "We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds." So what you see here is every single unit of this "we shall" pattern, there's a different length to it. They're not monotonous, which they would have been if you had the same, so 8 or 9 syllable clause, but they vary in meter, rhythm, and rhyme. So it feels like a wave that's getting bigger as it approaches you, and then it just hits you with a crash. Whereas with "we shall never surrender." And Aisha, I think it was, you mentioned a famous speech by another political speaker. Do you remember what it was?
Martin Luther King?
Yep. And of course, it's the same over there. "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down at the table of brotherhood." And of course, here, he varies in the length of these clauses as well over the course of his speech. It goes on for, I think 2.5 minutes. And it just doesn't sound repetitive, even though he's starting with the same phrase over and over again. So again, if you use this technique, it's fairly easy to use compared to the antithesis. Try to vary your sentences. In MUN, you don't have a lot of time. You have a minute and a half maximum. So make the most of it, whatever you can. Yeah, and back to you, Alvaro.
All right, and let's go to the last technique to make this short, which is called Tricolon. So what's a Tricolon? When you are given solutions to problems, when you are dictating what those problems are, you might want to make it a number of 3. Why? Because 3 gives a sense of wholeness, gives a sense of roundness, makes you feel like, the problem was all given a little bit of a roundness to it. So if you just say, for example, here we have an example that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom and the government of the people and by the people, you will not have felt like that speech was complete. However, if you are just of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth, you feel like that speech was round, like that speech covered the whole issue, like that speech actually gave a sense of meaning to what you were saying. Tricolons are very easy to use. Tricolons are something that everyone can just make up in a moment. You just have to try to list things as you are going on in numbers of 3. There's also another very famous clause from someone that also got backstabbed, which is Veni Vidi Vici. If Ulysses had just said Veni Vidi, he would not have actually won or conquered anything at all. Of course he would have, but we would not have remembered his words. So if you want people to go ahead and say and repeat your words during MUN, I would totally suggest that you try to use this technique, Tricolon, because, next slide, Mr. Red Altaf. One word, you can use it for power. If you only pronounce one thing, if you only list one thing, one problem, one solution, they will remember it. It will seem very powerful, it will come across, and people will stick with it. If you use 2 words, they will not remember it, but they will remember the compare or the contrast that you are trying to go ahead with it. And if you use 3 words, you will have given a solution to the problem, you will have covered all the problem ahead, and you will have enacted that feeling of knowledge and solution to the things that are going on. And also, something that is going to be important, and I will just say it and then my boss can go ahead again, is that you're trying to attack people's brains. So beyond using just techniques, you also have to do research. When you're giving solutions, when you're giving prompts, you need to seem knowledgeable. So do research, and for that, try to use your study guide, try to use the reference list on your study guide, and also try to use academic papers and press. You have just come into university, you will know how to use that, they will teach you how to, but really use a study guide, try to highlight everything that you don't know about or that you have never heard about in the study guide, try to look it up, use it. Us chairs are very happy when you seem to know your points, when you seem to have, read it all through, and also use a reference list. We put it there for a reason. We put it there because we want you to expand your knowledge on the issues that we are covering. So remember, 3 words, and make it meaningful, make it full of knowledge, make it full of solutions. And I'll go and give my word to the boss here.
Okay, so and I'm not your boss, Alvaro. I'm a colleague, as it were, and a friend, hopefully. So I'm just going to give you an example of a very, very recent 3-part slogan that is. I'm just going to stop your screen sharing here, and there we go. Looks familiar? Get Brexit done. A 3-word slogan or 3-part slogan is a favorite technique of Dominic Cummings. Yep, a big one that was passed everywhere in the last elections. And NHS slogans, what do you notice here? How many parts? 3 parts again. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives. That was the previous one. Then I've got, what is it? Hands, face, something. I don't recall.
Hands, face, case. That's it.
I don't know.
It's in the Spotify.
The point I want to, hands, face, and space, yeah, exactly. The point I just want to make here is that 3-part slogans are incredibly common, more than you could imagine. And I think you've been exposed to the 3-part idea a lot more than you might actually think, because if you think about the completeness of a 3-part idea or a story, think about Goldilocks and the how many bears? 3. Or think about the how many little pigs? Once again, 3. Or the 3 Billy Goats graph. So again, these are stories that have been imprinted or instilled into you, and the completeness of a 3-part idea is just instinctive to all of us. So yeah, and again, as Alvaro said, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is a pattern. So once you have established a list and you have implied a link, there is less to be gained by adding items after the 3rd one. What is 4 words? Which one? Make your mic red again. That is, in fact, 4 words, unless my counting is mistaken. It could be. It's 2:50 in the morning. But yeah, that's the point I want to make. And back to you, Ride.
All right, so just the final part, and then we're going to take questions and let you all off as well. So body language. I'm going to go into this into a little detail because I personally think this is a huge factor in how well you can determine your outcome in an MUN. Your body language can be a make or break, not just in terms of when you're giving a speech, but also in terms of when you're sitting down, when you're looking at the chair. I always recommend people, people say it's cheesy, I've been made fun of it as well, but I always say, imagine you're Harvey Specter from Suits. That's the kind of attitude you want to bring to an MUN, that confidence, that I would say charisma when you're sitting down and when you're listening to other people speak as well. So now let's talk about a few basics of body language. First of all, the way you stand. It makes a huge difference if you're not standing properly. If your shoulders are not straight, if your back is slouched, if you're just not looking confident in the way you're standing up, it makes a major difference in not only the words you're saying, but also how people perceive it. The second part is your hand gestures. Now, even if you notice today when I'm speaking, I'm constantly trying to bring my hands into the frame by keeping my computer in that kind of way. Because I honestly feel that hand gestures make a huge difference in the amount of impact that you can bring. At the same time, pro tip, when you're using hand gestures, you also tend to fluster less when you're speaking. It makes you go in a better flow when you're speaking as well. So try incorporating hand gestures in the way you speak. We'll talk about those a bit more in detail later on. I think posture and the way you stand is the same thing. Last thing is the facial expressions you have. So just making sure that you show happiness on your face when you're saying something positive can make a huge difference in how your audience perceives that. You're trying to instill your emotions into the audience at the end of the day. If you're frowning, if you're scowling when you're saying something, well, something that frustrates you, it can make a huge difference in how your audience absorbs it. And it will, if you're able to convince your audience that what you're feeling is what they should be feeling as well, you won the MUN. That's how it goes about. Now, last thing I'm going to cover, because I feel this is a huge part of your speech, is the tone of your speech. So, for those of you who listen to rap music, if you ever go on Google and search, why do people hate Nav? You find a huge list of reasons, but one of them is that the way he raps is pretty monotonous. And that is something that he gets a lot of hate for. Even though he's a rapper, the tone of his voice is quite still. And that's why people don't really like him much. If you listen to other kinds of music, you always see that singers are trying to, I would say, deviate the tonal variation of their voice to try to get people more attracted to what they're singing of. So the main enemy of your speech will always be monotony. If you're going to give your speech in one tone, you will not be making people listen to you. I would always suggest at the end of the day, when you're writing out a speech and when you're trying to speak it out in front of an audience, always try to incorporate a few high points and a few low points in your speech. At points where you feel that you're saying something exciting, something I would say that should induce happiness, or when you're about to say something that's sad, something that may be frustrating. It will make a huge difference in how the audience perceives your speech. Now, on to the homework we're going to give you today, which is not homework per se, but just a little task for you guys to practice a little bit about your MUN speeches. So, Yuman, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for that. And so the challenge for you today is to write an opening line using the rhetorical device you learned today. So that's 3 of them: Antithesis, Tricolon, and Anaphora. So try to use those in writing an opening line on a topic of your choice. It could be about Brexit, could be about trade negotiations, or any topic that you might find in an MUN conference or otherwise. You could be talking about your pet dog, even. So yeah, we're going to be, well, our next session is this Friday at 6 p.m. And we're going to have a bit of time for people to present their opening lines and for others to critique them, see what was good, what could be improved, and then we'll be giving some feedback as well. So in the meantime, if you have questions you want to ask about writing opening lines, drop any one of us a message in the WhatsApp group chat. If you are not in the group chat, there are links available in our Instagram bio in the link tree. So yeah, anything else you guys want to say, Alvaro and Ride and Henry as well?
I'll honestly say thank you all for joining us today. Really glad that you guys can learn as much as you can from these MUN sessions. Even if at the end of the day, you're not trying to go or planning to go for an MUN, just the fact that you can learn public speaking, learn negotiations, and learn how to draft up decent looking, I would say, resolutions, it will make a huge difference in how you can operate in your personal and practical life in the future. So good job for coming in today.
Yep, no, nice
and just to remind
you all here today. Sorry, Ewan, but just thank you all very much for coming. And this is all about practice and all about learning. But looking forward to seeing you all in the sort of weeks to come.
Yep, I was just going to say a reminder to join the WhatsApp group if you haven't already done so, and to sign up for UCLUNA, which is hosted next Saturday on the 24th of October. We also have the a freshers poll available, which Isabel has sent in the Zoom chat very kindly. And yeah, we'll be sticking around for the next 15 to 30 minutes if you guys just want to talk to us, ask questions, and just chill with us for a bit. Isabel, please go on.
Okay, so around all the links you need, WhatsApp group chat, how to buy membership, and everything else will be in the link tree. So if you input that, it will have everything nicely lined up for you and can click whatever that's applicable. So yeah, we tend to talk a lot in the WhatsApp group, and it's quite a friendly environment. So feel free to join us in that.
All right. Also, I would honestly say that for those of you who are still a bit iffy about attending UCLUNA, honestly, go for it. It's a completely beginner conference. Your chairs will literally be facilitating you if you tell them, I have not done MUNs before. I went to UCLUNA personally, despite my experience, and I literally saw people who had no experience come up there and win awards. So you can honestly go, you can learn, you can talk to chairs, and you can build a great network in the MUN circuit. So by all means, it's not even, I'm assuming, oh yeah, like Yuban said, if you have a membership, it's not costing you anything as well. So go for it. It's a really great learning experience for you if you want to get into Model UN. So that being said, thank you so much for everyone for coming in today. If you want to stay and talk around with us a bit more, you're more than welcome to. If not, you can also drop out. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. And also, do please fill out the freshers poll, which just gives us a bit more insight as to what times are preferable for you guys, what you guys want to see from our events and sessions. It also just gives us a bit of feedback as to how things could be improved going forward.